good triumph over evil. With gentleness, overcome anger. With charity, overcome stinginess. With truth, overcome deceit. This the Buddha taught. When the Lord was stormed by Mara, challenged to a battle by Alavaka, and attacked by the ferocious elephant, Nalagiri, he subdued them all with his perfection of giving, patience, and all-embracing love. By the power of that spiritual glory, may joyous victory be yours.
𝓤𝓾𝓷𝓲𝓪 and a very good morning, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. Welcome to the weekly Sunday Pūjā in Unison and Dhamma sharing online, an initiative of the 𝓤𝓷𝓲𝓼 Buddhist Council of Malaysia. It's certainly good to see all of you once again on this online platform. Today is the 30th of November 2025. Just a quick reminder, beginning next month, all Dhamma sharing will be occurring on the second and the fourth week of the month. Other weekends, other Sundays will be only Sunday Pūjā. Okay, to read out the offerings in English, I shall now pass the mic over to Sister Doris. What do you say, Doris?
Thank you, Brother Terence. 𝓤𝓾𝓷𝓭𝓪, a very good morning to all brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. It is a great blessing to be able to come today for Sunday morning puja and to review our precepts. Let us compose our minds and reflect on the meaning of the virtual offerings that we shall make with full respect to our blessed teacher, the Buddha. Offerings of lights. May we offer these candles burning brightly out of deep respect and veneration to our enlightened master, the Buddha. May this light symbolically guide us to the light of the Dhamma, which dispels the darkness of greed with the light of generosity, the gloominess of hatred with the light of love, and the darkness of ignorance with the light of wisdom through the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Offerings of joss sticks and incense. May we offer these joss sticks and incense out of deep respect and veneration to our blessed master, the Buddha. May the fragrance of these joss sticks and incense be pleasing unto the gods and Devas. May our good deeds be like the fragrance of this joss stick, cultivating compassion, patience, tolerance, understanding, and love towards all living beings. Offering of water. May we offer this water to symbolize our aspiration to cultivate the virtues of calmness, clarity, and purity. Let it remind us to diligently cleanse ourselves of our spiritual defilements and delusion through the cultivation of generosity, compassion, and wisdom. Offering of flowers. These flowers too we offer out of deep respect and gratitude to our compassionate master, the Buddha. These flowers, sweet, beautiful, and choice, are clustered at the feet of our noble master. Beautiful as they are now, they will soon, with passing of time, wilt and fade and be casted away. Reflecting thus on this very nature of unsatisfactoriness, impermanence, and soullessness, let us tread the path shown by the Buddha for the removal of suffering here and now. So let us start today's puja chanting by giving salutation to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha by saying sadhu 3 times. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Adinnadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Kame sumichachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Surame raya majja pamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Itipiso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho Vijja charana sampanno sugato lokavidu anuttaro purisa dhammasarati sattha deva manussanang buddho bhagavati swakato bhagavata dhammo Sanditthiko akaliko ehipassiko opanayiko paccatthang vedittabbo vinyuhiti Supatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho Ujupatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho Nyaya patipanno bhagavato savaka sangho Samici patipanno bhagavato savaka sangho Yadidam cattari purisa yugani atta purisa puggala Esa bhagavato savaka sangho Ahuneyo, pahuneyo, dakkineyo, anjalikaraniyo, anuttarang punyakkhetang lokasati.
Vandami cetiyang sappang sabbatane supatittitang saririkadatu mahabodhing buddha rupang sakalang sada yassa mule nisinnova sabbari wijayang patto sappanyutang satta Vande tang bodhipadapang ime ete mahabodhi 𝓤𝓾𝓷𝓼 pujita ahang pite namassami bodhi raja namatute Ganasarappadittena dipena tamadang-sina 𝓤𝓾𝓷𝓭𝓪 sambuddhang pujayami tamonudang ganda sambarayuttena dupenahang sugandina pujaye pujaniyang tang puja bhajana muttamang adivasetu no bante paniyang parikappitang anukampang upadaya patikan hatu muttamang adivasetu no bante bojanang parikappitang anukampang upadaya patikan hatu muttamang adiva setu no bante gilana paccayang imang anukampang upadaya patikan hatu muttamang vanna ganda gunopetang etang kusuma santating pujayami munindassa siripada 𝓢𝓾𝓷𝓭 pujemi buddhang kusumena nena punnena metena ca hotu mukkang puppang milayati yata idang me kayo tatayati vinasa bhavang akasatta ca bummatta deva naga mahittika punyang tang anumoditva cirang rakkantu loka sasanang akasatta ca bummatta deva naga mahittika punyang tang anumoditva cirang rakkantu desanang akasatta ca bummatta deva naga mahittika punyang tang anumoditva cirang rakkantu mang parangti Devo vassatu kalena sassa sampatti hetu ca pito bhavatu loko ca raja bhavatu dhammiko idang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo idang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo idang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo imina punya kammena mame bala samagamo satang samagamo hotu yava nibbana pattiya kayena vaca cittena pamadena maya katang accayang kamame bante Buri panya tathagata kayena vaca cittena pamadena maya katang accayang kamame dhamma sandit akalika kayena vaca cittena pamadena maya katang accayang kamame sangga supatipanna anuttara karaniya matta kusalena yantang santang padang abisamicca sakko uju ca suju ca suwaco cassa mudu anatimani santus sako ca subaro ca appakico ca sallahu kewutti santindriyo ca nipako ca appagabbo kulesu ananugiddo nacakuddang samacarekin ciyena vinyo pare upawadeyong sukino va ke mino hontu sabbe satta bhavantu sukitatta ye ke cipana bhutati tasavata varava anavasesa digavaye mahantava majjima rasakanuktula dittavaye va addita ye ca dure vasanti avidure Bhutava sambhave siva sabbe satta bhavantu sukitatta naparo parang nikubbeta nati manyeta katta cinang kanci biarosana padigasanya nanya manya seduk kemicceya mata yatani yang putang ayayusa eka putta manurakke evang pisabba bhutesu manasang bhavaye aparimanang mettang ca sabba lokasming manasang bhavaye aparimanang uddang ado catiriyanca asang padang awerang asepatang tittang carang nisinnova sayanova yavatassa vigatamiddo etang sating adittheya brahma metang viha idamahu ditting ca anupagamma silava dasanena sampanno kame suvineya gedang nahi jatu gappaseyang punaretiti etena satcha vajjena sottite hotu sabbada etena satcha vajjena sottite hotu sabbada etena satcha vajjena sottite hotu sabbada sadhu sadhu sadhu.
Thank you very much, Sister Doris and Sister Lily, for today's Sunday Pūjā chanting. Back with us this week, we have Brother Ghatikara Loo to share on all the beings in the Deva world. A look at Garuda, Gandhabba, and Deva from Samyutta Nikaya 32. Over to you, Brother Loo.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brother Terence, for the kind introduction, and a very good morning, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. I'm indeed very happy, that I'm able to again share, and discuss the Dhamma again on this wonderful Sunday morning. So before we begin with our Dhamma sharing and discussion today, let us first of all put our palms together in Anjali, and pay our highest respect and homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One, whom through his um, great effort and sacrifice, he has rediscovered the path to liberation, and that has made it possible, for us to learn, and practice the true Dhamma. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, a very good morning again, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. So for today's Dhamma discussion, I'm going to be extracting, the sutta, from the Samyutta Nikaya, which is the discourses, on the connected teachings of the Buddha, the Blessed One, and these suttas, are actually from SN 30, 31, and 32, and and these three suttas are interesting in that they are actually connected and related to celestial beings, which are actually very near our Manusa realm. If you recall, sometime was it earlier this year, I actually gave a Dhamma sharing as well, in Banda Utama Buddhist Society, where I actually spoke about Nagas, uh, and also the what and also in terms of the origin of Nagas, and how Nagas actually are reproduced, as well as how they actually grow, and also in terms of the different categories of Nagas, and also the karma that resulted in them being reborn as Nagas. I spoke quite extensively on that, and that was actually based on Samyutta Nikaya Sutta number 29. So that actually precedes SN 30, which I'm going to be speaking about, Garudas, or another Pali word is 𝓢𝓾𝓷𝓭𝓪. As you know, Garudas are actually, um, they are actually huge birds. They are huge birds, but they are actually huge birds. And if you actually look at the national emblem, of, for example, Thailand, inevitably you see a picture of this Garuda, or 𝓢𝓾𝓷𝓭𝓪, which is actually a huge bird, which is of course considered to be auspicious, because it is a celestial being, and of course, it's pretty extensive, and it is one of the celestial beings that you actually can find, very near to our Manusa realm, and that is actually from SN 30, and of course in SN 31, the Buddha also speaks about Gandhabbas, and of course I'm going to be also speaking to you about what Gandhabbas are, and how they originate, and the karma that results in them being reborn in Gandhabas. You know, and of course, SN 30, 32, then also centers, on this cloud devas, which are actually very interesting, because if you actually look at it, even in clouds, the Buddha says that even devas, that they actually, in a way, depending on which devas operate, in terms of when they want to in a way operate their powers, then that will also in a way determine, how the weather will be, So you'd be surprised, is we are not alone on this Manusa realm, I mean, all around us, we're surrounded by all these celestial beings, which of course, are invisible, to our naked eyes, because we do not have, the samadhi, in order for us to be able to see, to be able to be to enable these celestial beings to be visible to us, because we don't have that level of samadhi or the level of jhana for us to be able to see them or to communicate with them. But nonetheless, based on what we can see from these suttas, they are around us, and they do surround us. That's why I think there is actually a Chinese saying that do not actually do anything unwholesome. Because when you lift up your head, right above you, a few feet above your head, there are always devas looking at you. So and even I think in certain suttas also, the Buddha also there was also recounts of certain external ascetics, or even lay people, whom refuse to actually answer the questions posed by the Blessed One, after the Buddha actually asked repeat, maybe 3 times, and then the Buddha actually warned that, at the third time, when the Buddha asked again and you do not reply, then the this the thunder the thunder deva, will actually split your head, into 7 pieces. So I think such devas actually appear, around us, and we need to also be mindful, in terms of the karma that actually results, um, in the um, in the rebirth, of these beings, and how they're actually generated, and also to remind ourselves of how we should actually practice our spiritual path, in order for us to actually then get the best, results, in our practice. So, um, so I think I will now, share the screen in order to also be able to provide you, with a better understanding, in terms of um, the suttas which I'm going to be speaking about. Just give me 1 second, while I actually then share the screen. Okay. Okay, so okay, to start off, our Dhamma sharing, I'm going to be extracting a few suttas, which I actually extracted from SN 30.1, and this is actually from Venerable Sujata. Um, uh, Let me see. This okay, SN 30.1 itself, actually speaks about, first of all, Garudas, which I mentioned, but of course, Venerable Sujato actually translate this, as phoenixes, and as you know, Nagas, and these Garudas, I think based on what I can understand from the suttas, is that they're actually they are rivals and enemies. So you find that most often than not, the Garudas, which are huge birds, tend to carry off the Nagas, which are like the serpent-like, right? So the Garudas actually um, certain categories of Garudas are able to then carry off, and hunt the Nagas, and and these Nagas and Garudas are, they are actually in a way, like sworn enemies, and they actually hunt. The Garudas actually hunt the Nagas, So, but of course, there are certain categories which dictate, which classes of Garudas are able to actually carry off, and hunt which categories of Nagas, which Buddha actually also speaks quite extensive about. As you know, Nagas, right, which from SN 29, and also previous and the other suttas, which I spoke of earlier in my Dhamma discussion. Nagas actually, they are born in huge lakes, like for example, Lake Toba, and Lake Anotata, So when they are young, when they are actually like offsprings and they are very young, these Nagas actually, they reside in lakes, and so as they grow, they then flow towards the rivers, like for example, you have all these huge rivers like Ganges River, or even the Yellow River in China, which are huge rivers, and these Nagas will actually flow towards the rivers, and and ultimately they then stay in the ocean, and of course, these Nagas, they they are actually different ways that they're actually generated. For example, some Nagas, they are actually born from eggs. Some are actually born from the womb, and some Nagas are born from moistures, and some Nagas are actually spontaneously born, like what we call upapatika, like certain devas, they just appear, without going through, the the months, in the womb, and before they're reborn, but they're just reborn spontaneously, upapatika. So there are these 4 categories of Nagas, and And very similarly, to this Nagas, even for Garudas, or the Supanas, but here in this, I would just call Garudas, but they're actually phoenixes, So these are like birds, huge birds, but which are celestial beings, And of course, they do have, supernatural powers because they are celestial beings. So as you can see here, the Buddha actually says for these Garudas, huge celestial birds, Garudas reproduce in these 4 ways, what for, and the Buddha then uh, says, that these Garudas are born from eggs, from womb, from moisture, and also spontaneously. These are the 4 ways that Garudas are reproduced. Very much similar, to Nagas. Okay, so that's actually what the Buddha speaks of in 30.1. Okay, and then in SN 30.2, okay, as you can see here, the Buddha speaks about, the 4 ways, that the Garudas are reproduced, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of this being born from eggs, from womb, from moisture, and spontaneously. And the Buddha, went on to further explain that Garudas born from an egg can only carry off dragons born from an egg, not from a womb, moisture, or spontaneously. So you can see here, in terms of the gradation of the celestial beings, there are different grades, very much similar to Nagas, right? So for Garudas as well, those actually born from eggs, are in a way not as superior, as compared to those born from womb, moisture, or upapatika spontaneously. That's why, if the Garudas are actually they are born from eggs, they can only carry off, and hunt, nagas or dragons are born from eggs, but not from womb, moisture, or spontaneously. And then Garudas born from womb can only carry off dragons born from an egg or womb, which means equivalent or lower, but not from those moisture and spontaneously. And then Garudas born from moisture can only carry off dragons born from egg, womb, and moisture, but those which are spontaneously born can actually carry off dragons born from egg, womb, moisture, and spontaneously, because those which are Garudas which are born spontaneously, they are the most superior, and therefore they are able to carry off, hunt, nagas, which are born either from egg, moisture, womb, or spontaneously. So you can see the different gradation here, very much similar to nagas as well, because nagas, born from the eggs are of the lowest, and then those nagas which are born from the spontaneously upapatika, they are also the most superior amongst the 4 categories of nagas. So very much similar. So there seems to be this sort of gradation in terms of superiority, and in terms of how superior they are compared to other classes. Okay. So now the Buddha then went on in this SN 30.3 to actually speak about, what is the karma that actually results in beings being born as Garudas. So there was this monk who actually went up to the Blessed One. He bowed down and he actually sat to one side, and then he actually asked the Buddha, Bhante, what is the cause? What's the reason? Why someone, when their body breaks up after death, is reborn in the company of 8 born Garudas? So then the Buddha says, monk, it is when someone, does both kinds of deeds by body, speech, and mind, which means, well, actually in the translation of Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, he actually says that, when someone actually does, ambivalent karma, ambivalent means rather uncertain, like ambivalence, like sometimes you do good deeds, sometimes you do unwholesome deeds, so a bit like mixed, campur, sometimes, for example, you observe your sila, but sometimes, you break your sila, or it could be the case that, we out of maybe, the 10 two charitas, maybe you only observe 2 in by body, for example, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, or maybe you only observe 2 out of the 3, and then in terms of the 4 karmas by speech, right, I only observe maybe 2, I mean, at most I don't tell lies, and maybe I don't, I don't speak harsh speech, but sometimes I do tell lies as well, so I don't keep the sila, that perfectly, and then for mine, maybe you are covetous, or maybe you actually have this ill intention for someone to be killed, to be destroyed, someone to be slain, and maybe in terms of mind, you harbor, wrong views, so, when you actually keep some silas and you don't keep some silas, or you keep but sometimes not consistently, not conscientiously, so sometimes you do keep, sometimes you're a bit lax, or you lapse, in terms of keeping your sila, for your personal profit or what, you break your sila. So that's why the Buddha says when someone does both kinds of deeds by body, speech, and mind, which means wholesome and unwholesome, kusala and akusala. Also, you do both, and they have heard, the eight-born Garudas, long live, beautiful, and very happy. So they think, and so they actually make that aspiration in their mind. So if only when my body breaks up after death, I'll be reborn in a company of eight-born Garudas, So, when their body breaks up after death, they are reborn in a company of eight-born Garudas. So, this is the case, when someone actually directs their mind, for example, after they have done a good deed, or perhaps a wholesome karma, and then they make that resolution, and they make a wish in their minds that, uh, may I be reborn, in the company, of the eight-born Garudas, so they direct their mind towards that. So the Sankhara is that. So once you have the Sankhara, the coming energy is there. So this is the karma that will actually then drive the consciousness towards seeking a nama rupa, in the next rebirth, right? And that's where the nama rupa then then is a condition, for the sixth sense basis, to arise, and that's when you then have the contact, then the feelings, all these will actually come about in the craving and the clinging, So this is actually how the dependent arising actually happens. So that's why the Buddha says it's actually when you make that wish, that you want to be reborn, but at the same time your karma is actually not well guarded, so you breach and you actually break your sila sometimes, and you are not actually being consistent, or conscientious, in guarding, your body, speech, and mind. That results in you breaking the sila. And that's where you actually do ambivalent karma, that means mixture, sometimes good, sometimes unwholesome, So the Buddha says this is the cause, this is the reason why someone, when their body breaks up after death, is reborn in the company of eight-born phoenixes. So that's actually been stated by the Buddha in SN 30.3. And then continuing from there, the Buddha then went on to actually speak about this both kinds of deeds, and again, this monk also asked the Buddha in this SN 30.4 itself, to 30.6, then he actually asked, this monk actually asked the Buddha, Bhante, what is the cause, what's the reason why someone, when their body breaks up after death, is reborn, in the womb-born Garuda, the moisture-born Garuda, and spontaneous-born Garuda. So again, the Buddha also speaks, of the same similar cause, and that's actually when someone actually does ambivalent karma, and that's where someone does, or actually um, does both kinds of deeds by body, speech, and mind, which is a mixture of wholesome and unwholesome karma. At the same time, they actually heard about how beautiful, this spontaneously, Garudas, where they are long-lived, beautiful, and very happy. So they are celestial beings, but nonetheless they are birds. So in a way, they actually have, in a way, they are also have this animal characteristics in them, because they are actually Garudas, and they are actually Nagas. So they're different, from the other celestial beings, where which are born, as Devas, so they are actually where they actually have the karma, of being reborn as devas, but do not possess, of these animal characteristics, and if you read the suttas, on the Nagas, they actually reflected upon this. Why was I reborn as Nagas, where I'm not actually completely a Deva, but I do also, in a way, have animal characteristics like a Naga or a Garuda or a bird, And that's where the Buddha explains, that's where you actually, where you perform in deeds which are ambivalent, which are actually a mixture of wholesome, unwholesome, good and bad deeds you have done by body, speech, and mind. So since it's not conscientious, um, you are actually a celestial being, but at the same time, you actually have animal characteristics, um, and that's when I think in the commentaries they actually also, although I don't think the Buddha actually spoke about this, but in the commentaries, it's actually stated that that the Nagas and Garudas, because they are not completely devas, but they do have animal, in a way, characteristics and features, so they will not be able to actually realize, Magapala. Like for example, in terms of Sotapatti, it would be actually not possible, for them to actually achieve that breakthrough to the Dhamma, where the Dhamma are the Dhamma, Dhamma Chakku actually arises in you, where you actually attain Sotapatti. So according to the commentaries, that would not be possible for the Nagas, and the Garudas, of course, but I do not see that being mentioned by the Buddhas, but that's actually stated in the commentaries, and that's why I think they make the resolution that, I think if you read the SM29, the Nagas then actually make the resolution that from now onwards, I'll guard my Sila conscientiously so that I may be reborn, as a true Deva, It means, I'm no longer a Naga or a Garuda, but I want to be a true Deva, like for example, a Gandhabba, I want to be, like a cloud Deva, I want to be completely, to be reborn as a Deva and not being saddled in between and like a Deva, a celestial being, which actually bears animal characteristics. So this is where the Buddha highlights, the importance of guarding our sila conscientiously, not just okay, today I made the resolution of observe my 5 precepts. I won't do the 10 ducharitas, and next day, yeah, maybe I'll keep this sila maybe another day, but today I have no choice. I know I have to do, I have to actually do certain karma, but I'm sure, it will be diluted, or you'll be actually, in a way, you actually be, in a way, diluted or extinguished, if I continue to do, good karma. And they harbor this wrong view, when the Buddha actually, makes it very clear that if you do a mixture of both, both the kusala and akusala karma, will then bear their respective fruits, So it's not like as though you can dilute the akusala, with kusala karma, and it doesn't work like, diluting, a certain liquid or something, So it doesn't work that way, So that's why I think the Buddha makes it very clear that, the reason why, they are reborn is because, they actually it does both kinds of deeds, which are ambivalent, and that actually goes for this Garudas, which are born from womb, moisture, and also spontaneously, And of course, the Buddha in this 13.7 to 16, actually explained to the monks, that in terms of how actually someone actually gets reborn in the 8 born Garudas, and of course, the Buddha also explained about this ambivalent karma that this person performs, by body, speech, and mind. But at the same time, the Buddha says that this person actually give food, drinks, clothing, vehicle, garland, fragrance, and uh, makeup, bed and a house and a lamp, So this person, his sila is actually not uh, not well guarded, and he actually breaks the sila from time to time and doesn't actually, guard his sila conscientiously. But at the same time, the Buddha says that he actually does a lot of dana, like giving food, drinks, and to the maybe to the monks, the sangha, or even to whoever who needs, and does a lot of good deeds, in terms of providing vehicle, maybe offering robes, to the sangha, and and offering house accommodation and lamp and all this, but at the same, and you see, even by doing a lot of dana itself, this person is actually not um um he's actually in a way, not uh in a way safe, even though he did a lot of dana, but it actually doesn't in a way extinguish, or it doesn't actually atone, the fact that he actually does a mixture of good and bad karma, like for example, some of them they do a lot of this karma that's unwholesome in their profession. They actually deal with businesses, which involve a lot of this breaking of precepts like killing, and maybe trading of weapons and whatnot, right, and poison and whatnot. But at the same time, they do a lot of dana, and they think that, oh, by doing a lot of dana, I hope that I'm able to dilute, and then in a way mitigate, the akusala karma that I've done, by being involved, in this unwholesome profession that actually breaks the precepts, So they hope that, oh, the money I earn, I go to a temple and make a lot of donations to the sangha. I offer food, and they hope that this will actually, in a way, atone, or mitigate, or in a way diminish, their akusala karma. But you can see from this sutta, from SN30 itself, it doesn't, you can do a lot of dana, but most importantly, how's your sila, that is the determining factor of where you will go, that is the sila, that's very, very important, so the dana itself will just determine, how perhaps, the enjoyment you get, in the next destination, um, remember the AN 10.177, which I spoke to you about, someone who did a lot of dana but doesn't observe his sila, but in the end, he ends up, as a pet dog, pet cat, a pet horse, I mean, oh, sorry, a royal horse, a royal elephant, that sort of, situation where they get a lot of this luxurious enjoyment because of dana, but because of the sila that's actually not well guarded, they end up in the animal realms. It doesn't even, it's even not able to achieve or maintain the human status, so it becomes subpar below the human realms. So it's very, very important now, that the sila itself, is actually guarded. It's not about dana, doing a lot of good deeds and whatnot. You see, so this SN30, gives us, another insight, which again is in line with AN 10.177. If you actually look at the suttas, how beautiful the Dhamma is. Everything, is actually well, interwoven. That you don't see any inconsistencies between the Dhamma spoken by the Blessed One. And of course, in this SN 30.17 again, the Buddha talks about what is the cause, when their body breaks up, they're reborn as womb born of Garudas, moisture and spontaneous. So it's the same as the earlier sutta, which Buddha spoke about, the ambivalent karma that's actually performed by this person. Notwithstanding, the fact that this person did a lot of this dana, to profusely, that he performed, offered, food, drinks, garlands, beds, accommodation, lodging, to the needy, to the sangha, So despite all these danas, if you do not guard your sila well, you see, so you end up uh, uh, halfway like the gantong, like you're not entirely, Deva, but at the same time you're also not entirely an animal, but in between, you become like a naga or a Garuda, like you're a dragon or you are a huge bird, but you have powers, because you're celestial beings, but you're just like in the hanging in the air, like in between. So that's why you see a lot of these nagas making that resolution, may I guard my sila well and conscientiously now going forward, so that I can become a full-fledged Dewa going forward. You see, so that's important. The takeaway, the lesson that we learn from this SN30, it's not just about understanding, oh, there are actually Dewa, Garudas and Nagas around. Yeah, they are there, but we have to understand why, the karma that results in them being there, and how we should practice in order for us, in a way, not to practice in such a way that we are not able to be able to gain, a full favorable condition like a Deva, but and do not actually in a way have to bear that consequence, of being reborn as a Naga or a Garuda, but they're celestial beings nonetheless. But it's just that they are not full-fledged Devas, and possibly they are not able to attain the Sotapatti, like what the commentaries say. Although I didn't read that being mentioned by the Buddhas, by our blessed one, and of course in SN 31.1. Okay, next one, SN 31, I will then move on to talk about these Gandhabas. If you read the suttas, these Gandhabas actually appear in many of the suttas, and in this translation by Venerable Sujato, he actually used the word centaur, gods of the centaur realm, but I would prefer to use the word Gandhabba. But when I use Gandhabba means that these are like devas, which live in trees, fragrant flowers, um, roots, fragrant leaves, like maybe have the jasmine flowers. They like to actually stay around this, uh, y- yeah, like also maybe to share with you also, I near my house, near my house there is this tree, which like usually bursts into bloom in pink flowers, which are very fragrant. Um, I do observe, sometimes even when there's no wind, these trees they actually move, the leaves actually move by themselves, So I believe there are actually Gandhabas that actually stay in these trees, these trees, they are in pink flowers, and they are fragrant. But I've seen these trees move, the leaves moving, even if it's like totally there's no wind, it's a still day, and there's no yet I observed that the leaves actually move. So I believe that these Gandhabas that actually live in this fragrant wood, fragrant shoots, fragrant leaves, fragrant flowers, and fragrant fruit, fragrant sap, and fragrant scent. So whenever you have these plants that exude this fragrant scents, very frequent, and scents and odors, that actually attract all these beings, called Gandhabas, So these are actually called, Devas, in the Gandhabba realm, So this is what the Buddha spoke in 30 SN 31, and if you see this Gandhabas, in many of the suttas, right, you find that these Gandhabas, they also appear in Tavatimsa heaven. Like, for example, you see this DN 21, right, where the Buddha actually spoke about this meeting, where with our Saka Deva Raja, remember, and Saka, right, actually asked, this Panchasika, this Gandhabba called Panchasika, to actually meet the Buddha first before he would proceed to meet the Buddha, just to actually maybe test water to see how whether the Buddha was actually convenient for him to see the Buddha. So he actually got this Panchasika, to actually um, meet the Buddha, and this conversation took place between Saka, and Panchasika, So you can see this Gandhabas actually are present in Tavatimsa heaven as well, not just in leaves or fragrant trees and roots, So it's actually very interesting. And these Gandhabas, they're actually very skilled musicians, They actually, if you read this suttas, this Panchasika, right, he has this arch harp, made from the pale timber of wood apple, and he took this arch harp, and he went to Indra's hill cave, where the Buddha was singing, and he was actually serenading to the Buddha, using this harp, and he was singing a song about how he actually fell in love with this girl Gandhabba, who is actually daughter to this Timbaru, But this girl Gandhabba, is not interested in this Panchasika, She has a heart, um, you know, on this son of um this Matali, the Saka's charioteer, Matali, he has a son. So in fact, um this um this uh Bada Surya Vachasa, this Gandhabba's daughter actually likes and is fond of this Matali's son, but this Panchasika is actually has fallen in love, with this Gandhabba girl, who is a daughter of this Timbaru, but even though he likes her, she likes another another, who is a son of this Matali, the charioteer of Saka. So this is a long sutta lah, right, but I just want to show you, that actually these Gandhabas are not just found in, on our trees, roots, and what do you call that, fragrant flowers, like jasmine flowers and all this, they but they are also found, in celestial realms, like even in Tava Timsa, they are there, and they are musicians, who actually play the harp, so, and they are actually quite musically inclined, this Gandhabas, so quite interesting in terms of these Gandhabas, they're musically inclined and they play these instruments. But in other suttas, you also find that the word Gandhabba is also used by the Buddha to refer to a being who must be present before, fertilization can take place, in a woman's womb, because as you can see here, this is actually from MN 38. If you read from this sutta, MN 38 itself is actually what we call the Tanha Sankaya Sutta. This is a greater craving destruction discourse, MN 38. And in this Mahatanha Sankaya Sutta, right, there's actually this section, MN 38, where the Buddha spoke about Gandhabba, which is actually interesting as well if you actually look at it. It actually says that monks, the descent of the embryo occurs with the union of three things. This is the case where there is, where firstly, what the first situation is, there's no union of mother and father, and the mother is not in her season, and a Gandhabba is not present. So, because of these three things are not there, there's no descent of an embryo. It means you don't, the embryo doesn't, it's not formed. The egg is not fertilized into an embryo. So there's no descent of the embryo. And then the second scenario is where there is a union of mother and father, and the mother is in her season, but a Gandhabba is not present. Means even though you may actually have a union of mother and father, and the mother is in her season, um, uh, which means during the right cycle, but a Gandhabba is not present, and even and because of that, there's actually no descent of an embryo. The embryo doesn't get formed. There's no fertilization, and the third situation is, but when there is a union of mother and father, and the mother is in her season, and a Gandhabba is present, a being that's ready to be reborn, the Gandhabba, getting ready, the moment the mother's in season and there's union mother father, and this Gandhabba actually then takes immediate rebirth into this womb, and that's where that with the union of these three things, the descent of the embryo occurs. So you see, that's why the Buddha says, and of course, the Buddha says, for 9 and 10 months, the mother shelters the embryo in her womb with great anxiety and as a heavy burden. So you see, the Buddha actually then speaks of this being that must be there, before the embryo is formed. So even if the mother and father, there's union, and the mother in her season, but the Gandhabba is not there, so you actually won't get the embryo, to actually descent, and for the fertilization to happen, for the embryo to be formed. So you must have these three conditions, the union, and the mother's in the season, and the Gandhabba must be present. So that's why the Buddha again in this sutta actually talks about the Gandhabba, which actually used to refer to an intermediate state being. So that's why I think in Abhidhamma itself, where actually it talks about rebirth is instantaneous, that there's actually no intermediate state where, once a person departs, from and the body breaks up, and he departs, and immediately there's actually reborn, there's rebirth, and this person is reborn into another realm, and there's no intermediate state. But actually, if you read the suttas, there is an intermediate state. That's why I think more often than not, like you sometimes experience like, like maybe your a family member who has passed away, and after maybe 7 days, you actually hear, that this maybe sounds of footsteps, while you're sleeping, or the door opening, or maybe, the drawers open by themselves, or maybe you can hear, certain noises or voices, coming by beings to show that they are there, and these probably are Gandhabas, and they are just there, and not necessarily they are Petas, but they are Gandhabas, and they are just waiting for the right time to be reborn, and they are just beings floating around, like Gandhabas, and you can actually read recounts of these Gandhabas, in many rebirth, by Francis Story. Remember he actually wrote books about rebirth, by Francis Story, and you actually read about this Gandhabas, which is very interesting, and but this is again being supported by what the Buddha spoke in MN 38, which is about Gandhabas. So just to give you, an overview in terms of the context of Gandhabas. So it means different thing in different contexts. So again, in 31.2, the Buddha actually spoke about the reason why someone is reborn in the gods of the Gandhabas, because I think among us, why did someone actually get reborn in the Gandhabas? So the Buddha says is when someone does good things by way of body, speech, and mind. You see the difference between this and the Garudas and Nagas. The Buddha doesn't talk about ambivalent karma or does both deeds by body, speech, and mind. Is when someone does good things by body, speech, and mind, which means consistently your sila is well guarded by body, speech, and mind. That's why you can be reborn as a Gandhabba Deva. Otherwise, you might end up as a Naga Deva, or a Garuda Deva, but because of the ambivalent karma, but because you you do good things by body, speech, and mind. It's not ambivalent. You actually guard your sila well. That's where the Buddha says that you're reborn, as gods, of the Gandhabas. So and here it says, then of course they make the resolution that when their body breaks up after death, they're reborn. They make the resolution that when my body breaks up after death, I'll be reborn in the gods of the central realm. So they make that resolution, and then so when their body breaks up, they're reborn in the gods of the Gandhabas. So this is the reason why someone, when their body breaks up, after death, is reborn in the company of the gods of the Gandhabas. So you can see that being mentioned in this Samyutta Nikaya SN 31, which is also very interesting. So remember, in this sutta, the Buddha speaks about, does good deeds by body, speech, and mind. That's why you are being reborn as a Gandhabba, But for the Nagas and the Garudas, it is does both deeds, which means ambivalent, sometimes kusala, sometimes akusala. So in SN 31.3, the Buddha again asked, no, sorry, the monk again asked the Buddha, they said, Bhante, what is the cause? What's the reason why someone, when the body breaks up, is reborn in the Gandhabas, in the fragrant roots? Then of course, the Buddha says that when someone does good things by body, speech, and mind. You see, so again, you see the Gandhabas are just devas, which means they are actually spontaneously reborn, not like the Nagas and the Garudas, where you actually have born from eggs, born from womb, born from moisture, and spontaneous. No, right? So for the Gandhabas, they are just spontaneously reborn, as devas. Because of what? Because of the consistency, in actually observing the sila and the conscientiousness in guarding the sila. That's why the Buddha says when someone does good things by body, speech, and mind, that's where uh they are reborn, in the Gandhabba realm. And why do they actually are reborn as Gandhabas in fragrant roots? The Buddha says, because they give gifts of fragrant roots. So they like to actually give fragrant roots and offer fragrant roots perhaps to the Sangha, or to whoever who needs it. They like to offer fragrant roots. So when the body breaks up, they're reborn in the company of gods who live in fragrant roots. So you see, a lot of things we do, actually get um, imprinted in our mind, and somehow it results in us being reborn, in that situation, that or in the circumstances where we make the offering, like you make fragrant roots, that's when you're reborn. So again, You see? So, and in this SN 31.13, the monk again asked the Buddha, what's the cause for someone actually, is reborn, as a Gandhabba, living in fragrant roots? Again, the Buddha, first of all, speaks about sila, when someone does good things by way of body, speech, and mind, you see. So that is the first thing that, that is a condition that that one must fulfill before one can actually be reborn as a Deva, as a Gandhabba. So and on top of that, of course, they do a lot of dana like food, drinks, clothing, vehicle, garland, fragrance, makeup, and lamp. So when body breaks out after death, they are reborn in the company of the gods who live in fragrant roots. So as you can see here, they do a lot of they first of all, they guard their sila well, but at the same time, they also do a lot of dana. So they are reborn in as Gandhabas, and they also then enjoy the merits they have gained from offering dana. But the first thing the Buddha mentions is good. They do good things by way of body, speech, and mind. And that is the condition that must be met. And of course, the dana itself actually then, provides that further support, in actually then, result in them being reborn, in Gandhabas living in fragrant roots lah. So as you can see here, the sila itself is very important. You know, that is the condition that must be met lah. And of course, they also do dana as well. And in 31.4 to 31.12 itself, um, again, the monk asks, other than the fragrant wood, right, they are also asked about Gandhabas being reborn in fragrant hardwood, softwood, bark, sprouts, leaves, flowers, fruit, sap, and fragrant scents. So why is it that these Gandhabas are born, in all these places? And the Buddha again, starts off by actually stating, that it's because of the conscientiously guarding of the sila, so they do good things by way of body, speech, and mind, and it is not ambivalent karma that they perform, where it actually comprises both kusala and akusala. But for the Gandhabas, they have actually been guarding their sila well, and they actually perform good deeds by way of body, speech, and mind. And of course they give gifts of fragrant hardwood, fragrant scents, and they also do dana. They actually offer a lot of this fragrant hardwood, fragrant softwood. They actually make a lot of these offerings, flowers, fruits, and because of these Gandhabas, they are actually reborn, in flower, in fragrant hardwood, in flowers and fruits. So if you make a lot of these offerings of flowers, maybe to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and at the same time you got your sila well. So and you make that resolution that if only after my body breaks up after death, I aspire to be reborn in Gandhabas, and so it's very likely that you actually be born in Gandhabas living in flowers and hardwood and softwood, hardwood and softwood lah. So again, okay, and of course the Buddha then talks about the Gandhabas, when the monk actually asks, the Buddha, why these Gandhabas are reborn, in the different areas, very similar to the earlier one. But in this sutta, the Buddha doesn't just talk about offering of this like fragrant scents, and softwood, hardwood, flowers, offering of fruits. But at the same time, this person also do a lot of abundant dana. They give food, drinks, clothing, vehicle, garland. So when the body breaks out after death, they're reborn in the company of the gods who live in fragrant scents. So that's why the Buddha is actually highlighting the fact that firstly, your sila, must be um, in a way conscientious, and try to be impeccable, in your sila, and not be involved in ambivalent karma, and at the same time, it will help now, if you do a lot of this dana by offering food, drinks, to monks and to whoever needs it now. But that itself, doesn't actually provide you the support, but it's a sila itself that's important now. So next in SN 32.1, the Buddha then speaks about the cloud devas, in SN32, the Buddha actually tells the monks, I'll teach you about the gods of the thunder cloud host. So these are the devas of the clouds. Um, and you can see here, the Buddha explains who and what are the devas of the clouds or the thunder cloud hosts. Who are these cloud devas? They are actually devas, of cool clouds, devas of warm clouds, deva of stormy clouds, devas of windy clouds, and deva of rainy clouds. These are called the clouds of the gods of the thunder cloud host. So these are the cloud devas. So Buddha essentially highlights that there are these different types of cloud devas. You actually have the cool devas of the cool clouds, warm clouds, stormy clouds, windy clouds, and rainy clouds. So you have different types of cloud devas. So this actually mentioned in 32.1. And then in 32.2, again, the monks actually ask, what is the karma? What's the cause that someone actually is reborn, as a cloud deva? Again, you see, the Buddha says is when someone does good things by way of body, speech, and mind. Again, this affirms the importance of guarding our sila well, and conscientiously, and not be involved in ambivalent karma, where you sometimes you observe, sometimes you don't observe, or you observe only certain silas, like a subset of the silas, certain silas you choose out not to observe. So that's where you have ambivalent, you perform good and bad deeds. But then, if you want to be reborn as a cloud deva or like a Gandhabba earlier, then the Buddha says, is when someone does good things by way of body, speech, and mind, and of course you make the aspiration, that, may I be reborn as a cloud deva, because I heard that cloud devas are really splendid. They are actually very good looking. They are very exquisite. They're beautiful. They are very happy. Living in very happy conditions. So may I be reborn. So once you have done good deeds, like maybe you perform dana or sila, or you actually then meditate or what, then you make the resolution, or maybe reborn there. So but the most important thing is that your sila must be well guarded. So that's when the Buddha then mentions, yeah, so this is actually where condition that can help someone to be reborn in the cloud deva. And again in 32.3, again, the monk again asks, the Buddha, Bhante, what's the cause, what's the reason, someone actually is reborn as a cool, a cool cloud deva, a cool cloud deva. And of course, you see the Buddha then talks about, when this someone does good things by way of body, speech, and mind, you know, and they make their resolution, and at the same time they give dana as well, food, lamp, but you see, the Buddha always starts off by saying sila, that's the most important, and dana, of course, that does help, in terms of, how perhaps, how resplendent you are, how shiny you are, maybe as a cloud deva, how good looking you are, and how powerful and authoritative you are, as a cloud deva or as a Gandhabba. That depends, of course, on the dana that you do. But to get your foot right on the doorstep, to be as a Gandhabba, as a cloud deva, make sure your sila is well guarded. So that's very important. Okay. And again, in SN 32.13 and 5.2, again, the Buddha, the monks ask about, the Deva, warm cloud deva, stormy cloud deva, windy cloud deva, and rainy cloud deva. Same thing, the Buddha says, does good things by way of body, speech, and mind, instead of does both deeds. So we must take heed of this, and ensure that our sila is well guarded. But at the same time, it does help to do a lot of dana, like offering food, lamb, then when you're reborn, as a cloud deva, you're more powerful, you're stronger, you have more authority, you're more good looking, you're more resplendent, you actually are more luminous, and you give out more light, that sort of thing, uh so both help, the dana and sila itself, so both must actually be equal, and in 32.53, the Buddha then answers this question by a monk. And this monk actually asks, Bhante, what is the cause? What is the reason why sometimes it becomes cool? So the Buddha actually explains, monks, they are what are called gods of the cool thunder clouds. These are because of the cool cloud Deva. So sometimes they think, why don't we revel, in our own kind of enjoyment. So because they want to actually revel, and they want to then perhaps have some fun time, revel in their own kind of enjoyment, they then perhaps use their maybe their psychic power or the supernatural power, then in accordance with their wish, it becomes cool. So the weather then becomes cool because of this cool cloud Deva. This is the cause, this is the reason why sometimes it becomes cool. And again, um, the monk asks, why does it become warm sometimes? So the monk says, this is because of the warm cloud Deva. So this is actually when they want to revel in their enjoyment. So they use their uh, perhaps supernatural psychic powers, and then they they perhaps wish in their mind, that may it be warm, so that's when the weather becomes warm, and it becomes very shiny, and the sun shines very brightly, and it becomes very warm, so that is the how it happens, why it becomes warm. And then also then the monk asks, why does it becomes like stormy, like you have this stormy days, where you have all these tropical rains. It becomes very like like you're gonna have a tempest, like stormy. Then the Buddha says, well, this is because of the stormy cloud devas. So they want to also perhaps use their supernatural powers to actually have some enjoyment, and so according to their wish, they make that wish, but through their psychic power, then it becomes stormy. So this is the caustic reason why sometimes it becomes stormy. Maybe I don't know, by attracting the certain movements of the clouds, or what that results, in heavy rains to be sent down, onto the human realm. So that is also the function of this. And of course, the windy clouds, the Buddha also explains, why does it become windy, or it's because of this windy cloud devas, because they want the weather to be windy, so they then display their psychic power, by wishing that it be windy, and becomes windy, somehow, because of that, the difference in pressure happens, and then that's where, it becomes windy. Okay. And why does it become rainy? Again, because of the rainy cloud devas, because they actually want to have their enjoyment, of rain. So they make the wish because of psychic power, then, it becomes rainy, so the heavens then rain down, heavy rains, so as you can see, it's actually very interesting, in terms of the different devas. But you can see here there's a distinction. You actually have celestial beings, which they're not full-fledged devas. They are actually like dragons, and birds. So they still have some animal characteristics, but at the same time they are devas. But at the same time, you actually have full-fledged devas as well. So that's where you actually have um this yeah sorry, so you have this clouds devas as well. So uh and of course, um you actually have this I just want to share with you also some suttas, where actually talks about the importance of observing sila, as you can see from AN 10.177, where, the Buddha actually speaks about, if you actually do a lot of dana but not keeping your sila well, so that's where, you are, reborn as pet dogs, pet cats, and royal elephants, and, royal stallions, because of the lack of sila, you're actually reborn in the animal realms. But at the same time, you do a lot of dana, so that's why you get to enjoy all the luxuries of life. Where you get, like very comfortable pet beds, very comfortable, places to stay in, and have exquisite food, as animals to, and get all the manicure and pedicure as animals, but at the same time, you are just animals because of your lack of observing of sila. So that's where you can see from AN 10.177, which I actually explained earlier. And uh, and of course, Buddha actually mentions about the importance of sila, just to share with you a few suttas like AN 10.169, where the Buddha talks about those who don't observe their sila actually are actually in the near shore, and those who observe their sila well actually in the far shore, you know. So Buddha says a few are those human beings who cross to the far shore, the rest just run around the near shore because they either are not ignorant of the silas or they just simply do not take the effort to observe the sila, So the Buddha says to 𝓤𝓾𝓷𝓷, which is a Brahmin, a lay person. So that's where the Buddha actually explains the importance of observing this to ensure that we don't commit any of the 10 𝓤𝓷𝓷s, like I mentioned, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, 3 by body, 4 by speech, and 3 by mind, which I mentioned before, these 10 𝓤𝓷𝓷s. Because once you perform these 10 𝓤𝓷𝓷s, they create the potential for you to be downgraded and to be degraded into subhumans, like as a ghost, as an animal, or as in the realm hell realm, this sutta itself is also important. And again, in this Iti-Vuttaka 70, in this Iti-Vuttaka 76, the Buddha actually says, if you actually make the wish, may praise come to me, may a wise person may aspiring to these 3 forms of bliss, a wise person should guard his virtue. Which 3? May praise come to me, a wise person should guard his virtue. May wealth come to me, a wise person should guard his virtue. And the breakup of my body after death, may I reappear in a good destination in heaven. So a wise person should guard his virtue. So aspiring to these 3 forms of bliss, a wise person should guard his virtue. So as you can see here, the Buddha says that if you actually want to reappear in a good destination, the guarding of the sila is actually very important. No? So that is actually what the Buddha actually highlights, in this Iti-Vuttaka 76. And of course, few other suttas here, that I just want to highlight to you. In terms of the purpose of observing our sila, the Buddha says this observing our sila is actually the foundation, the foundation, of the entire spiritual path. Because once you actually have the good sila, or you actually guard your sila conscientiously, right, then you actually have freedom from remorse as the result. And from freedom of remorse, you actually have joy. And then from joy itself, the Buddha says a rapture arises, And from rapture arises, then you actually have this serenity, tranquility, as its reward. So from serenity itself, then you actually have pleasure as a reward. And then from pleasure itself, comes, the samadhi, And then from samadhi itself, you actually have this knowledge and vision of the things as they really are, as its purpose, and with the knowledge of vision and things as they really are, then you have disenchantment as the result. And then with disenchantment as the purpose, you have dispassion as its result. And with this passion, and then you actually have knowledge and vision of release, as its purpose, And this is actually where you realize, have the breakthrough to the Dhamma, and realize, the Dhamma. So this whole spiritual path, the Buddha says, actually predicates on having sila, and that is mentioned in AN 11.1 itself. Okay, and give me 1 second. Okay, and then in AN 11.2, the Buddha talks about this Chaitanya Sutta. of course, Buddha actually mentions that, if someone actually is endowed with sila, there's no need for act of will, may freedom from remorse arise in me, So all these, the Buddha says, arise um, um, in a way spontaneously. So you don't actually have to have have an act of will. And just to share with you also, in terms of the Vipaka Sutta, where the Buddha talks about the results of actually not observing the sila. Um, this is actually where the Buddha actually mentions the danger if we don't observe our sila. For example, if you're in, if you, if you actually are, you know, involved or perform this killing, taking of life, this actually will lead to rebirth, as an animal, or the hungry ghost, or even in hell. But once that karma is exhausted and you actually come back to the human realm, then you actually tend to have a short lifespan. And then for stealing itself, it leads to loss of wealth, and for illicit sexual behavior, sexual misconduct, it leads to rivalry and revenge, when you appear as a human being again. And then and then for falsehood, it actually leads to being falsely accused. And then in terms of tale bearing, it leads to breaking of one's friendship. And then for harsh speech, it leads to unappealing sound. And then for frivolous chattering, it actually leads to words that aren't taking to heart. And then for drinking of fermented and distilled liquors, it leads to mental derangement. So that's why you can see here, the Buddha in AN 8.40 actually speaks about the Vipaka Suttas, the results. So just to share with you, some of these suttas. And if you read SN 42.8, the Buddha actually also highlights something very interesting about observing the sila, is that the Buddha says, let me see, let me just show you. Let me see. Um, you see, he says here, the Buddha gives something very important for us to think about. He says here, all those who take life are destined, to state of deprivation. So which means, for example, if you have actually perhaps maybe you have actually broken or you have actually broken a precept, and you actually hold the view that because I've actually perhaps done a lot of these unwholesome karma, by, say, for example, killing or stealing or sexual misconduct, because of these that I've done, right, he holds on to the view that I'm destined, to go to the higher realms. I'm destined to go to a state of deprivation. I'm destined to be reborn, as an animal or or in hell. So he actually holds on to this view. Okay, so and and so the Buddha says that if he doesn't abandon that state of mind, right? So and he actually holds on to this view, then it's as if he was actually carried off, and he'll be sorry, he'll be placed in hell. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Sorry. So I think that what the Buddha actually is saying, what the Buddha is actually saying here is that if you actually hold on to this view, and you don't abandon the view, and you keep on thinking that you have actually broken the sila, and definitely, you'll be reborn in the hell and to the higher realms. So the Buddha says that definitely, you actually bring you to the state of deprivation. But then the Buddha says, uh, what should be practiced is that, you see, the Buddha says here, Okay, here it says the Blessed One in a variety of ways, censures the taking of life, and says abstain from taking of life. There are living beings but there are living beings that I've killed, or to a greater or lesser extent, and that I know is not right. That was not good. But if I become remorseful for the reason, and I keep on thinking about it and keep on feeling remorseful about the reason, that evil deed of mine will not be undone. So reflecting does. He abandons right there the taking of life, and in the future refrains from taking of life. This is how there comes to be the abandoning of that evil deed. This is how there comes to be the transcending of that evil deed. So what the Buddha is actually saying here is that, if you actually have broken the precepts, say for example, any of the 10 to 2 charitas, the Buddha says that, by being remorseful, and keep dwelling on that, and keep thinking about, because I've done this, I'm definitely going to the upper realms, and being maybe reborn, in the hell as an animal, or as a peta. The Buddha says that if you keep on dwelling in that, definitely, you're going to land up in that because your mind, is actually, in a dosa state. I mean, it's actually in an unhappy state. But if you actually uh, actually then because of then like, if you make the resolution that you will not actually um, um, that you will actually not be involved in this and make the resolution that you want to abandon it, going forward. That's where the Buddha says, that that you'll be able to transcend that evil deed. So as you can see from here, the Buddha actually gives us a very strong reminder that it does not matter, if you actually have done or broken the precepts before, but the Buddha says that do not always keep dwelling on it and become remorseful, but you must make a resolution to transcend it and abandon it, so that you make the resolution not to actually break the precepts anymore. And that's where the Buddha actually, reminds us as the important things to do. Okay, so I will actually uh, take a pause for this section, for this Dhamma talk. I will continue with part 2 of the sutta, where I will actually then speak about, how do we actually then practice in order for us to, observe the sila more conscientiously, by way of, watching our mind, and also be mindful, in terms of, what actually arises in our mind is as part of the citta nupassana. So I will stop here, and pass the floor back to Terence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Luz, for today's sharing. Now let's dedicate some merits to all beings, whether they're seen or unseen. Akasatha cha Bhummata Deva Naga Mahittika Punyang Tamanamoditva Chiram Rakkantu Lokasasanang Ettavata Chang Hehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Deva Sabbe Bhuta Sabbe Satta Anumodantu Sampati Siddhya Idang nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. And aspirations. Imina punya kammena mame bala samagamo satang samagamo tu yava nibbana pattiya sadhu sadhu sadhu. Thank you everyone watching. For other videos, please visit the links below. Bye bye for now. See you all again soon.